Today's episode is of a guest appearance I made with the group 100,000 Fathers. This is a group that was started by Gary Jun-kun, whose stated mission is to reunite 100,000 fathers with their estranged children due to divorce. This episode is all about health, fitness, and if you're a dad, how to stay in the fight, stay healthy so that you can be there and be a role model for your children. Stay tuned.
Today we have Dave Morrow, my brother, all the way from Canada, as a guest for our community today. And for each of the guests that come in, what I like to do is cover different topics to cover the different areas of the pillars within our lives. And an extremely important one today is talking about the body pillar. And this is something that I know in my own life and many fathers that I've spoken to, when you go through a situation of either the early stages of losing contact with your kids, or you've maybe lost contact with them for a couple of months or years, working on your body is kind of the last thing in your mind. It's focused on your work, focused on how on earth can you actually get to see your kids again. And so this is an area that just slowly declines within your life. And something that I was used an example before this call talking to Dave was, if you ever break your leg and you put that in plaster Paris, that after 3 or 4 months of taking it off, you can notice a very large difference between the muscle mass between the right leg or the left leg, whichever one was in the cast. And this is only because you have something to compare it by. If you're not using the muscles within your body and not actually working and strengthening on that, it naturally declines, it atrophies. So this is something that David has focused many years of his life on, and we'll go into what became the catalyst within his life. But first of all, Dave, welcome to the community. I know you're a father of 2 young boys. You do get to see your kids, which is something that is, I'm so grateful that you've got your kids within your life. And, you know, as we go through this call, I would love to just tap into the experience that you've had within your life leading up to this point. But welcome, first of all, Dave.
Yeah, thanks a bunch, Gary. Just to correct you, got a young boy and a young girl. So we've got the full perfect family, right? One of each. But thanks so much for having me on, and I'm excited to have a cool conversation here.
Thanks, Dave. What are the ages of your kids?
My son is 5, going on 15, and my daughter is 2, going on 18. So yeah, it's good. It's great. It's a great time at home.
Those are busy ages, hell of a busy ages. Tell me, what do you feel is the role of a father in a child's life?
Well, I don't see it that much differently than when I was a leader in the military. You need to lead by example.
Okay.
And ultimately, that's the way I frame myself, how I create my identity as a father. So what do I want my kids to see me do? Because rather than tell them what to do, I want to show them. So one of the main things is PT, exercise, healthy lifestyle. I know what the data looks like for kids that are not healthy. We have an epidemic of type 2 diabetes for young children now. It's no longer adult onset diabetes. That scares me. I don't want to hand my kids a death sentence, an early death sentence, because I was negligent. And so therefore, I take the whole health aspect of my role as a dad very seriously. And I've subsequently created a company around it. So that as well is something that I want to show my kids, that if you have a dream, if you want to go ahead and do something, you can work hard at something that you're really passionate about, and you can help others in the process. So that's how I view myself as a dad.
And you said that diabetes is becoming such a major problem there, even for young people. What is that cause? Is it totally diet related? Is it the overall lifestyle? Is it just lack of movement? What really is the biggest cause for that?
Well, if you just look at the data right now, 88% of North America, well, I should say Americans, that's what where the study was focused, but we can safely assume Westerners, Canadians, Americans, we're very similar. 88% of us are metabolically broken. What that means is, out of the 4 conditions that determine your metabolic fitness, one of them isn't working right. So that includes obesity, includes high blood pressure, that includes high cholesterol, and the last one is escaping me right now. But essentially, if those aren't tracking in the right direction, you can consider yourself metabolically unfit. And right now, that's 88% of the American population. So therefore, if you are unfit, unhealthy, odds are, and that's what the data shows, that your children are going to be unhealthy as well. Now, is it possible that everybody in North America just doesn't care? I don't believe that at all. That's, in my opinion, just something that is pushed on us, that we're not doing enough, that we're not training enough, that we're not, stopping, or withholding the foods or eliminating the foods that are causing us harm. I think we've been pushed a message that is contrary to what is good health. And unfortunately, it's hard to break out of that messaging cycle because we've heard it for decades. Eat less, do more, eat less, do more, eat less, do more. But if you just look up and you observe your surroundings, well, we've been doing that for 40 years. But what are the effects on the ground? Everybody's metabolically broken. The average human being is overweight. 30% are obese. That's not good, and it's affecting our children. And that's something that is deeply concerning to me. I used to be a fat kid, and that is imprinted on my brain and who I am. And it was my dad that showed me that you can be fit. He was old school Arnold Schwarzenegger style bodybuilder, right? Back in the 70s, going to the gym and lifting weights. And I would remember him coming home from a run, because everybody ran, in the 80s, the Adidas shorts, the high socks, the headband. And I was just curious, like, what's dad doing, And now that has translated into what I do. I have my kids do push-ups in the morning, and we go for little runs. We do just active stuff that's not training, but it's giving them the habit so that they'll just hopefully carry that forward, and it'll just be part of their lives moving forward.
Definitely, even in my own life growing up, so many people around me would always say, "Oh, just take it easy. You only live one life. Just go ahead. Eat whatever you like. It's only one life that you live." But what they don't actually tell you is that, yeah, you're going to live that one life until you reach probably early 50s, maybe even in your 40s. And you will then start paying the price of that for the next 40 to 50 years of a body that doesn't have a muscle structure to actually support your skeletal frame. And so you are going to start having knee problems, lower back problems. You are going to start paying the price of this while you only live one life. And so that saying should be adjusted. Yeah, you only live one life, have an incredible 20s, and you're going to pay for one hell of a price down the road, and 30s. And despite my life where I didn't really move my bodies, and only after I lost my kids, if I were to show you a photo of my passport where, 7-8 years ago of what I looked like, and I'll try and find this now as I'm talking, to actually show you of this guy that ate terribly. Whenever I saw other people that, didn't drink alcohol, I'm like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with alcohol and drinking? It's totally fine. What on earth could be wrong with having alcohol? And my overall diet of pies and Red Bull and chocolate and sugar, eventually only when I actually went to a nutritionist and actually had a look at my diet and some blood tests, and she said, if you continue the way you're going, you are going to be a diabetic, so exactly, but by moving in, one of the first things I did was going for that run, removing those toxins out of my life in terms of unhealthy foods, the alcohol, the sugars, the chocolates, the Red Bull, all those things that tasted good and felt good, but actually didn't serve. So what are some of the things that fathers, because when I say remove the toxic things out of your life, I haven't really defined that for fathers. What are some foods and drinks that fathers can remove out of their life that don't serve them? And what are the things that they could replace those with that over 1 or 2 or 5 years they're going to start seeing, it's going to be a completely different human being as a result of what you're putting into your mouth.
It's a really good question, man. I think if we just keep the conversation around drinks and what to eat.
Yeah.
The simplest way that I've been able to convey this is that if you go to the grocery store, stay on the outside and don't buy anything frozen. Like if you stay on the outside, what's on the outside? You got fruits, vegetables, meat. It's pretty much it. Eggs, milk, cream. So keep it simple. Eat how somebody, let's say 150 years ago would eat, or 5,000, 6,000 years ago would eat. They didn't have grocery stores. What would they eat? Well, they'd eat a bit of meat, bit of carbohydrates, maybe some fruits and vegetables. But as soon as you start complicating things and you add things that modernity has allowed us to have, then you can start running into some issues. But I don't want to give the impression that you can't enjoy things. You brought it up, like enjoy life. You need to enjoy life. If you don't enjoy life, what's the point? But it's ensuring that, and I use Stoic philosophy a lot of times for this, is that you need to ensure that you struggle a bit, and you need to ensure that you have the ability to maintain the discipline. If you know that alcohol is bad for you, if you know juice is bad for you, if you know the excess carbs are going to eventually lead to weight gain, well, if that's the case, how can you mitigate that so that you can still enjoy yourself, but then still be able to stay healthy? So the way I see it, especially with alcohol, funny story, like when I started changing my life, I would, and typically, like I still do this, if I'm going to eat eggs, I usually have 5 or 6 eggs. That's pretty much standard for me. Where I was getting pushback was, dude, you're going to eat 5 and 6 eggs in one shot? Oh man, like your heart's going to explode. But none of my friends would say anything about me having 3 or 4 beers in a sitting. Okay, that's weird. So it's what's socially acceptable based on the perception or the concept of what is healthy for you based on whatever science that you've incorporated over the years. And then you put a value judgment on it. So, having 3 or 4 beers is, he's just being social. He's having fun. That's okay. That's not too much. He's not an alcoholic. Compared to, having 5, 6 eggs. Oh my God, that's going to cause cholesterol. That's going to cause you to have a heart attack. And just being able to identify those things, like, well, what actually is going to help me out long term? And ultimately, if you can identify the foods that you're eating or drinking that may lead to adiposity, increased body fat, or increased inflammation, then it's your responsibility to only consume them in moderation. And additionally, the other benefit of having some moderation to what you do is you'll enjoy the little things that you like to enjoy even more. I thoroughly enjoy having a really good beer at the end of the week because I hold on to it and I say, man, I can't wait for that on Friday. And I get a more expensive beer than, Molson here. Yeah. I get something that I really enjoy. I might spend an extra few bucks on a craft beer because I really enjoy it, but I'm only having one. And so if you can start applying that into your food consumption, your drink consumption, you'll notice that your quality of life will actually go up. Just like all things, if you hold back a little bit, you'll when you get to have it, you'll appreciate it that much more. So I guess big picture here is reduce as much as possible the amount of sugar calories you're getting in your drinks, the juices, the wine, the beer. Those are typically killers because they just jack up insulin. And we could talk about insulin and the effects on your hormones, and how you want to make sure that you have really good grip on your hormones, especially for us guys, our testosterone levels. And drinking too much sugar and just having too much sugar in general can definitely play havoc on your hormones and your endocrine system.
I love the simplicity of that. Stay on the outside to the shopping center, to the grocery store. And I've just played back so many of the grocery stores I've been in, and it's so true that it is that outside areas is where fruits and vegetables are at, your meats are at, all the basic essentials are at. The inside is where your cans of Coca-Cola and your crisps and chocolates and sweets are all on the inside there, all the preservatives. And then what you were saying about, well, still enjoy your life. And I probably could equate this to, if you make a fire and at the early stage of that fire, you put a big log onto it, you're going to kill that fire. But if you've got that fire going and you throw a couple of smaller branches onto that, that's just going to get burnt up in that fire. That if your body is in a healthy place, having a beer occasionally, having a pack of crisps occasionally, or a pizza occasionally, it's not going to have an impact on your system. You're able to burn that out of your system very easily. So still, this life isn't just about becoming a monk and no longer enjoying your life type thing. You still got to have some pleasure in life, not being antisocial. When you go out with your friends, oh no, I can't have a beer, and shaming them. I went to a Mexican wedding here with my son, and I had a couple of beers with my son. It was great. But prior to that, I just don't need it. And it's in the same way that your kids are going to look at you of what exercise you're doing. I could see how my son looked at me not drinking. And in England, it's so social there drinking beer that he came over here buying 6 packs of beer. From the start of his trip, he would have 5 beers. By the time he left some beers in the fridge, where on the last two or 3 days, he didn't even have any beers. And so you become such a gravitational force in your kids' life through the actions, not telling them what to do, but through your own actions of exercise and the food. So I love those simple principles you've just shared there, brother. What principles and ideas have you learned within your life that guide you today, just through failures, through whatever has taken place? What guides you today?
The first one that comes to mind is the mind follows the body. And I think that was probably the most important one that I've really embraced, because, and I'll put this in the context of your group, right? Like the goal here is to maintain a connection with your children. That's going to require a struggle, a fight. Men only have the ability to really put up a fight and get aggressive. And I'm not talking like necessarily physically aggressive to, combat somebody, but that does exist too. But you need an adequate level of testosterone. Full stop. The problem is we're seeing such a rapid decline in testosterone levels in men, and to ascertain why, it's a multi-headed beast to try and figure out why. But ultimately, what I've discovered is that if you're not moving, there's no way that you're going to be able to improve that level if you need it to be improved. And if you can't improve testosterone, or at least maintain testosterone levels at a certain level, men can't think clearly, and we have zero focus if our testosterone levels aren't adequately high. And so therefore, if you're not moving, if you're not struggling a little bit, if you're not putting some tension in your muscles, it's very hard to increase your testosterone levels. And I'm talking naturally, obviously. So therefore, the mind follows the body. Yeah, you have to start moving. I wasn't moving nearly as much. Once I left the military, I started teaching. And sure, I was on my feet a lot, but I just wasn't putting in the work like I used to. I wasn't going to a combat zone. I was like, I did my time. I was just in my early 30s. I had already had the mindset, like, I'm done. The rest of my life is gravy. And I realized very quickly, and the moment where I realized that, okay, things have fallen off the rails here, was that I just couldn't walk properly anymore because my back and knee injuries were getting awful. And it seems counterintuitive that you'd have to move more in order for your injuries that cause pain when you move to get better. But that is the case. Our bodies are healing machines, and they need blood in order to do that. And therefore, you need to sort out, well, why do I experience such incredible pain? It may be because you're just not moving enough. And it doesn't need to be heavy. It doesn't need to be complex. It literally can just be as simple as walking. And that is what I've boiled almost everything down to, is what are the simplest human things that we need to do on a regular basis and stay consistent with in order to be a healthy man. And it really comes down to just a few key principles. And at the base level, it's going for a walk outside and getting in some sun. And that, I think, has been the biggest switch in my brain, is that at no point do I just allow myself to be complacent unless I'm very sick. But get outside, do something active. It allows your brain to clear up. It allows you to maintain proper hormonal balance and homeostasis. I think that's my guiding principle right now, is that the mind follows the body, and then everything else can sort itself out in the wash. I have a few other principles. I don't know if you want to hear, but that's my main one.
I love that principle, and Jeff as well commented on that principle. Are there some others there before I come back to that principle and the movement and testosterone comments you made?
Yeah. Another one's look good, feel good, do good. If we kid ourselves that we don't want to look good, a lot of times it's just society makes us, I guess, feel guilty that we don't want to have big arms, we don't want to have a nice proud chest, because that's vanity, right? We don't want to pretend that, or we don't want to say that out loud. But ultimately, when I'm okay with saying, like, I want to have juicy arms, I want to go to the beach, and I want to look like a fit dad. And the reason for that, and I learned this while I was teaching at the all boys school that I was at a few years back, was one of their mantras was look good, feel good, do good. And that's why they had to wear their own suit and tie to school. It was really cute when 12-year-old boys wear like a nice suit and tie to school. But then you had the 17-year-old men essentially wearing their suit and ties. They could pick whatever suit they wanted. There was no standard on that, but it had to be clean, it had to be sharp. And the point of it was, at the base level, if you look good, your inherent behavior, because you get more serotonin, you end up feeling good. You literally take a more powerful position. And you may have heard about, power stances, you call it like the Captain America, whatever, put your hands on your hips, chest up, shoulders back, chest out. These are the things that we teach in the military, but they are rooted in very deep brain science, that if you do that, you will behave better. You will be more virtuous. You will be a little bit more aggressive in a good way. So looking good is a very important part of expressing virtue. If you look good, you feel good. And if you feel good, guess what? You're going to do good for others. You're going to do good for your family. So going to the gym is not just about, longevity and having the ability to, let's say, run 10K or lift something. There's the component of looking good, physically looking good. And guess what? Your wives, your girlfriends, well, thank you for it, because they want you to look good as well. They see it as a sign of health. So don't kid yourselves that it's not an important aspect of being a good man. It is. It's very important. And that's another principle that I've incorporated too. And that's why right now I'm in the gym, because I want to look good. I've been honest with my trainer, been honest with myself. I want to put on more muscle mass because I want to look really good, because I want my wife to show up on a weekend, whenever, be like, Dave, you look freaking good. You look like Captain America. I want her to be proud that her husband is in shape. And that's something that I hold dearly. And it's something that I lost for a little bit. And it's unfortunate because I just lost pride in myself. But now that's a principle that I definitely embody moving forward. And it's definitely helped me and my relationship.
That's looking good, how your body feels, that working out, that movement. So much of this, and for the fathers that are watching this call recording, where they haven't seen their kids for a few years, and it could be another 5, maybe 10 years for them to actually see their kids. So what you're doing by moving your body, eating healthily, working out, is for the longevity, for that future time when you do get to see your kids. And what kind of man are they going to see and meet in that future? Is it going to be this man that is hunched over, bad posture, badly dressed, like no muscle mass, feeling shit about himself? Or has this man been putting in work? Has this father been putting in work? Has he been preparing for this moment, for that deployment? Basically, it's preparing for that moment. And who that child sees when in those 5 years or 10 years time is going to make a difference on how they see you and how they're going to respond to you. Of how part of a father's role for me is being a mentor to them, showing them, not telling them. And by you leading through example of this difficult event that you've faced head on, and it didn't break you, it actually made you a stronger man. What kind of beautiful example and teacher is that going to be for your kids when they do see you, that this didn't break dad, this made him stronger, a better person. So this, what we're doing now, is serving our future. So I love that point there. The next is this, that testosterone, and I've seen in my own life of, as I've gone to the gym and started lifting weight, how that fire starts growing inside of me. And it is this drive to be able to be a better person, to be better at work, to be better and actually start accomplishing things inside of our lives. And you can only really notice the impact of that if you haven't had that for a while, and then you start getting that back again by lifting weights, on how you start feeling. And are there other ways to be able to release that testosterone in your body? Is it only through lifting weights, or can it be through a diet? I know there are obviously testosterone injections and other tablets and stuff you could take, but a natural route, what is the natural way that can be increased?
I'm glad you brought this up, Gary. We're going to go down the rabbit hole, man. So I literally built a program just for this exclusively, to be always stimulating testosterone naturally based on the best science out there. So let me walk you through this at a very basic level. I'll give you an example of some research that is relatively new. If you take a soldier before deployment, measure their testosterone on deployment, their testosterone goes way up, way up. And why is that? Well, it's a fight or flight response, right? There's the potential of having to kill somebody. You have to be dialed in. And personally, I've never felt better, period. For the 8 months I was in Afghanistan, I got bigger, I got stronger. I was always wearing heavy gear. Even on my off time, I was bench pressing more than I've ever bench pressed in my life. And now I understand why. I mean, you've got that surge of testosterone that lasts quite a while. When you come back after 1 or 2 years, you see a gradual drawdown to quote unquote normal levels. One thing that's been interesting in the research is that they've noticed that individuals that had a lower testosterone before they deployed, regardless of how high their testosterone went during the fight, had a greater chance of post-traumatic stress disorder. The mechanism of that is not entirely clear, but it seems like before you get into a fight, so in this case here, like if you're going into the fight and you're talking about, looking good, feeling good, doing good with, fight for your children, the better you can get that testosterone level before you really enter that fight. While you're in it, you'll likely have a boost in testosterone because you want to win. That is an important part of testosterone. It makes you competitive. But afterwards, after that fight, you may see that that could be, a depressive moment. You may have lost. You may still not have a victory. How long can you maintain it? So it's important to always think, how do I ensure that my homeostasis, so my baseline hormonal levels, are adequate enough to do what I need to do? And therefore, the mechanisms in which that happens is through what's called the HPG axis. So that's the hypothalamus, pituitary, gonadal axis. So the hypothalamus is a small little organ in your brain. What it does is it signals your pituitary gland, which is the master gland. If you remember back to grade 9 science, it kind of dangles in the middle of your brain. What that does is it signals your testes, so your testicles, to produce testosterone. It also allows you to produce sperm. So clearly very important. So I think if you follow me, if that axis, if any point in that axis, there's a break, there's something that's interrupting with the signaling, you will have lower testosterone. Now, one thing that is proven to improve testosterone levels is good sleep. Point final. When I was teaching high school boys, one of their questions, especially when they hit 15, 16 years old, they're like, "Sir, I want to get jacked. What do I do?" And I would go to bed, man. And they didn't understand how to take that. Like, yeah, but sir, no, I asked you, I want to get jacked. I'm like, look, your levels of testosterone at your age are about 4 times that of what our testosterone levels are in your 30s, 40s. You will never have higher levels of testosterone in your life. You could go do 20 push-ups, a few squats, some sit-ups, and tomorrow you will be bigger. But you need to ensure that your mechanism of that happening is not interrupted. And likely, you're staying up to 2, 3 in the morning watching porn on your laptop or on your iPad, and you're not getting adequate sleep for your age, which is like minimum 8 hours. And we all remember what it was like to be a teenager. I would sleep sometimes 12 hours. Easy. Your body requires that rest to produce not only testosterone, but it produces a ton of human growth hormone. During that first phase of sleep is when you have the most pronounced amount of human growth hormone, and that allows you to repair and build more muscle mass. The cool thing about building more muscle mass is that it helps you produce more testosterone. Now, the correlation to that, or I should say the opposite side of that coin, is that if you are fatter, so if you have more adipose tissue, if you are in the overweight to obese category, fat tissue in and of itself is estrogenic. It produces a tiny bit of estrogen. So imagine you're going to the gym, you're training hard, but you're not sleeping well. You're putting on a little bit of muscle, but you're not losing body fat. If anything, you might be putting on some body fat. Well, now you've got your foot on the gas and you got your foot on the brake at the same time. So what can bring down stress? Adequate sleep. And there are so many things that are interrupting our sleep patterns. And it's something I went into in one of the episodes with a Navy SEAL sleep doctor about how he noticed with himself and the SEALs that he was in charge of were showing all these weird symptoms of mental health disorders, poor sleep. They're getting injured all the time. And these are obviously the pointiest end of the stick when it comes to the American military. And they were falling apart. And so was he. And as a doctor and as an officer in the SEALs, he started doing his research as to why. And it all dovetailed to these troops were not getting enough recovery time to get their sleep dialed in. And they were taking sleep medication most of the time to try and get them to sleep. And that's not natural sleep. And therefore, they don't produce the same amount of growth hormone or testosterone. And they were finished. They were just ruined metabolically and ruined hormonally. And what it took was a protocol to get your sleep dialed back in, which takes months if it's already broken, which includes a whole different list of things that you can do. But at a fundamental level, if you're aware that, hey, my sleep is not adequate, I wake up, I'm kind of groggy. I don't have a sleep hygiene protocol before I go to sleep. When I'm tired, I force myself to stay awake. You may be on your phone before going to bed. All these things contribute to you not getting adequate sleep. And that's fundamentally where I start with pretty much everybody is your sleep broken? Because if that's not getting fixed and that's not being worked on, your chances of increasing testosterone levels drastically decline. So it's as simple as figuring out how to get some better sleep to start bumping up your testosterone levels without even having to go to the gym.
Okay. So sleep definitely. And is the recommendation 8 hours? Does it make a difference if you had 9 hours, if you could try and get that?
I mean, from what I understand and from what we discussed on the podcast I mentioned there with Dr. Parsley, anything past like 7.5, 8 hours, it's just a law of depreciating returns. Now, everybody's different, right? So the research isn't 100% conclusive, but because we're always talking about averages, right? When we do large scale control trials, but ultimately you can judge whether or not you've had enough sleep just by the fact that, well, can you get up without an alarm clock? That's kind of like the gold test. Like if you can get up without an alarm clock, okay, you're good. Now, some people go to sleep a little bit later than others. Some people can go to bed a little bit earlier. Some people wake up, and that's really circadian rhythms and just hormonal action, right? Because there's a whole cascade of hormones that put us to sleep, and there's a whole cascade of hormones that wake us up. And if we break that willfully because of modern society, we keep our lights on, we have all kinds of artificial stimulation, we don't go to bed as soon as it gets dark. Like this has been, over 150 years of this kind of behavior. We just normalize that, yeah, we stay up till 11 o'clock. But ultimately, if you go in the country and maybe have limited access to, electricity or whatever it may be, stay in if you go camping, you're not staying up till 11 o'clock because you're going to pass out. It's just a natural thing. The temperature goes down and your body feels more relaxed. You start producing melatonin, and then all of a sudden you're asleep. And then you wake up because the sun's up and it wakes you up. So these are just some natural things that we've allowed ourselves to kind of break in our daily routines that have a massive impact. So I guess to answer your question, is it 7, 8, or 9 hours? It really depends on you, but ultimately I would say the most important thing is what we call sleep density. So it's not the amount of hours that you're in bed. You know, it's kind of like doing junk training. It's like if you're doing just, you know, a few reps here and there in the gym, you're not really focused on what you're doing. You're not going to see that much of a change. You're not going to see a massive stimulus to actually elicit more body mass in terms of muscle. Same with sleep. If you're not doing it well, if you don't have the density, let's say you get 5 hours of really dense sleep, it's better than 8 hours of crappy tossing and turning and waking up and going back to sleep and not really falling into deep sleep. So I would say the density is probably the most important thing, as opposed to the actual time in bed, which we typically measure as, you know, well, if it was in bed 8 hours, yeah, but how much did you actually sleep? That's the important question.
Do you have a routine before going to bed, and what is your sleep environment look like, or what have you set up to aid the best sleep?
Oh man, if I could provide, you know, the most valuable, I guess, protocol that I apply with everybody else I work with, is the cool dark cave protocol. And I got this from Dr. Parsley. It's essentially make your bedroom super cold. So 17 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit for your American people, but it's relatively cold, right? And that's like optimal sleep temperature. Additionally, make your room as dark as possible. So 0 electronics. People often think, oh, the electronics, the EMF ready. No, it has nothing to do with the radiation. It's the fact that there's usually a light on something that you have. So whether it's an alarm clock, whether it's your phone, we typically all go to bed with our phones now. Just eliminate it, get it out of there. And obviously really dark shades, blinds, however you can figure that out, get it as dark as possible so you can't see your hand in front of your face. And then the hardest one to implement, those are relatively easy to implement. It doesn't take much effort. I mean, the biggest complaint is likely from your wife or your girlfriend that will say it's too cold in here. You know, it'll give you more reason to cuddle at night, and the consequences of that could be beneficial as well. So win-win. The hardest thing though is definitely putting away your phone. You want to do it 2 hours before you're planning on going to bed. So what I do is they have a reminder, right? It's like, hey dummy, it's, you know, 8 o'clock, time to start putting your phone away. So I try to stay, then like I'm human, right? So these things are crazy addictive, and I'll pick it up and be like, oh crap, yeah, right, it's 9 o'clock. Okay, because I typically would go to bed around 10. So the reason for that is that the phones produce a lot of blue light. There's a blue light filter on your phones too, so you can put a nighttime mode. I strongly recommend you do that. You do it on your laptops as well. So what it does is it makes your screen kind of a little bit more orange tinted, because the blue light has been shown to hit your retinas and interrupt the melatonin response in your brain, because it's saying, oh, it's daylight. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll stay awake. No problem. And then that sleepiness that you start to feel, you need to embrace it. You start feeling sleepy. I typically push that away. It's my old infantry habits of no, I don't need sleep. I keep on going. But the goal is to let your body start going into that sleep mode, turn down the lights, start getting relaxed. And then once you start feeling that sleepiness, then your body's telling you, go to sleep. Just like hunger. It's like, hey, I'm starting to feel a little bit hungry. Okay, I'll go have something to eat. Same thing with sleep. Just listen to your body. And if it's at 9 o'clock, go to bed at 9 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock, go to bed at 10 o'clock. It's just finding that rhythm and staying consistent, even on the weekends, which is the hardest thing to do. Get up at the same time. If you're getting up at 6, get up at 6. That's how your body works. Try not to sleep in. If you're tired, go to bed earlier, have a nap. Those are my biggest recommendations in my protocol for sleep.
I want to talk about food and fasting. Are there some benefits of fasting just with your immune system? From what I've researched, is there an impact potentially on testosterone by depriving your body of food for 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours? What is your understanding of fasting?
Man, I love fasting. That's been the biggest level up that I've been able to apply to myself and to those who I work with over the last 2 years. I can't remember exactly when I came across it, to be honest. I don't remember the moment where I'm like, I'm going to give this a try. But as soon as I started doing it, I noticed immediate benefits. I guess the most important one is you can finally start understanding when your cues for hunger are present, and if you're actually hungry or just thirsty or craving something. And then you start getting an awareness of how your body works at a more fundamental level that I think we all had up until, I don't know, maybe 2-3 generations ago. And hunger is one of those important things, because typically your body falls into patterns, and you get hungry because, well, there's a bunch of different hormones that start being stimulated at around the same time that you typically eat. So if that's breakfast, lunch, dinner, you're going to start getting hungry around those times. So what I started doing was testing on myself. Okay, what can I do? And I started with a simple 16-8 fast. And that's basically a window where I don't eat for 16 hours and a window of 8 hours where I eat. That's what we call an intermittent fast. So the easiest one is just skip breakfast, eat lunch, dinner, and carry on the rest of your day. And the reason why I started doing this is that I wanted to see, like, am I going to have any sort of body composition changes? And I noticed that I started to actually lose body fat. And that's always a plus. Especially as a trainer, I wanted to make sure that I look lean enough. And so that was an interesting bonus. Now, when it comes to your actual metabolism and how your body reacts to it, there's a concept called autophagy. So autophagy is basically, imagine your cells, they do a whole bunch of stuff, but not every cell lives forever, right? Like if that was the case, we would live forever, but cells eventually die out, and there's bits and pieces that stick around. Well, your immune system has to figure out how to get rid of that. So there's white blood cells, and they rip it apart, and essentially you pee it out. Okay. But that whole system, in order for it to work really well, it needs a break in order to do its work. And if we're constantly in a fat storage mode, and that's typically when we're eating. So when we're eating, the body has to parse up all the macronutrients, put the vitamins, minerals, everything away. It's a beautiful system, super complex. But if you have a storage hormone like insulin, and when you eat, insulin goes up, especially if you eat something that's got a lot of carbohydrates. If you're constantly stimulating that system, you cannot grow and deplete at the same time. Okay, so you cannot be actively growing muscle and getting bigger and stronger and actively trying to lose it at the same time. Your body wants to do one thing at a time. So therefore, if you're constantly eating, that ability to create just that cleanup is hindered. We all do a fast every day because we all go to sleep at some point. We're not eating during that fast, so your body can survive. It's built for this. So that's one thing. The autophagy, what it can do is just clean up some extra dead cells, so less free radicals. One thing I noticed was just a clearer ability to think. And I also noticed that I was hungry around breakfast time because I always had huge breakfasts. So I canceled that out. I got a little bit anxious around breakfast time. But aside from that, once I realized I can control this, it's just a mind over matter thing. And in about 5 minutes, it goes away. Have a glass of water, miraculously, you're fine. You do not get hungry. That's the other thing too. You do not get ravenously hungry. And it's understanding that your body can go for days, go for weeks without eating. The longest recorded fast is over 1 year. And it was done in the 50s, I believe, with Angus Barbieri in Scotland, who was 400 and some odd pounds. He was monitored by a doctor, and they did a study on him. He had water, obviously, but that was it. And he never put the weight back on. It's a fascinating case study. What that shows is that, obviously, if you have adequate body fat, you can survive off of that. Now, most of us, I'm sure here, have higher than 5% body fat. That's pretty standard for everybody, unless you're a competitive bodybuilder. So therefore, you have a ton of reserves on you. You will not shred muscle in order to get that energy. We have a beautiful metabolic system that is built to go grab fat stores when we need it. And that's what we're tapping into when we fast. So when you push past the 16 hours, you go into, let's say, the 24 hours, typically you start seeing an increase in growth hormone. One thing that I noticed is that because you're actually stimulating more adrenal hormones, which means you get a pop of energy, which seems very counterintuitive, but let me explain the reason why. Is that, imagine 10,000 years ago, you need to go find some food for your family. You need to go hunt. It would have been very hard for the species to carry on had you missed one meal, and now all of a sudden you start cannibalizing muscle tissue and you start losing energy. the system was built so that you would gain energy, you'd gain focus, you gain clarity so that you could find that next meal. So long as you're drinking water, you are a long distance machine. And so therefore you can go get that hunt. You can, pull that bow and arrow, you can spear whatever that animal is with a lot more aggression and a lot more focus. And this translates to us right now. The longest I've done is a 72-hour fast. So it's 3 days, and I felt awesome. It was hard, don't get me wrong, but at the end of it, I could have gone longer. I lost about 8 pounds. Typically, I put on about 2 to 3 pounds in rebound just because your body gets rid of all kinds of water and glycogen. And I'm a big dude, so I have a lot. But ultimately, you can access those fat stores a lot easier if you're fasting. It increases your adrenal hormones, so you get a little bit more focused. And additionally, in a longer fast, you start seeing increase in growth hormone. Now, one thing that's typically not advisable is to do any sort of very strenuous activity like lifting heavy in the gym. You just won't have the energy, you won't have the pop. But walking, doing some cardio, doing anything that keeps your body moving will just ignite the fat burning machine. But it's something you need to build up to, because typically we eat all the time. Your body will just say, what are you doing? It's too much of a shock, too much stress all at once, and it'll be just all systems on deck, and you'll have a massive stress response that will just be unenjoyable. So a lot of people have tried to say it doesn't work for me because I was miserable, I had a headache, I had stomach cramps, and the list goes on and on and on. But essentially, if you start with the approach of crawl before you walk, walk before you run, with fasting, the benefits are just incredible. And just to cap this all off, this isn't anything new. Every one of our religions across the planet incorporates a fast. And there's a reason for that. They had an ancient understanding of how the human body worked. We're in the middle of Ramadan right now. We're in the middle of Lent right now. They all incorporate a fast because it allows your body to heal itself at a fundamental cellular level that we lost along the way. And now we're starting to bring it back. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of it. That was a long-winded answer. I'm sorry, but I just love I love fasting.
I know you've gone deep on all of this, and it's something I've spent a number of years doing fast, from the intermittent fasting through to 2 days, 3 days, 4 days fasting. And it's very interesting just observing your body as you go through this, as you switch your fuel type from glycogen to ketones. Ketones comes from the actual fats, if that's the correct science there. And it's just a different type of fuel that your body can use, which is incredible. But most humans, modern day society humans, never experience that, because you're eating 3 meals a day and there are so many carbs inside of that meal that it never shifts you into a state of ketosis. And so this fasting, it's like you've said, there's so many benefits. It's the opportunity for your body to remove toxins out of it in the cleansing phase, because you're not just constantly throwing something into it. It allows other beautiful time is it just gives you so much more time. You're not spending, 3-4 hours a day making food and eating that food. So it's a beautiful benefit of that. And just this higher level, there is a clarity of thought that I have as I go into day 2, day 3 of that fast, where I just think differently. And so it's, you're doing something our ancestors used to do all the time. There were no fridges. It's what I experienced in the Amazon jungle there. Every 3 or 4 days, they're going off to hunt for 3 or 4 days, and that's just a natural cycle and process. And we've broken how we naturally used to operate and how we used to eat. So just a question before you come back to your point there, Dave. One of the fathers here had a question. Doesn't that cause your body to go into starvation mode, the intermittent fasting, or even a fast? If it does, doesn't that create more fat cells?
That is probably the most common question, and it's a great one. So this idea of starvation mode, right, is something that was popularized during just the explosion of bodybuilding during the 70s, especially with Arnold Schwarzenegger and gym culture. And what came of it was these individuals were at the elite level of bodybuilding. They couldn't ever sacrifice a single ounce of gain. So they were constantly eating. They were constantly eating high carbohydrate, high protein foods, very low fat, because they were trying to stuff as much into their cells as possible. And if you want to do that, that's how you need to eat. If you miss a meal, you could potentially lose a little edge, right? You're not stuffing your cells with as much glycogen. You do not have necessarily as much energy to lift your next rep. So therefore, that could be an issue. But 99.9% of us aren't in that category. And so therefore that science, and a lot of it is bro science, just trickled down. So we got this idea that, well, if we don't eat, we're going to lose our gains. And so therefore this culture of constantly eating and snacking, companies loved this. They're like, oh, we can create snack culture. So it also applies to gym culture now too, because like, well, you got to have your shake, right? You got to have your pre-workout. You got to have and you wonder why, like if you're not putting in the volume of lifting, you're getting kind of chubby. I experienced this. I was smashing CrossFit workouts like crazy back in the day, doing 5 workouts a week. And I remember walking past a store and looking at my reflection, and I had this big gut. I was like, what the hell is going? Because I was eating nonstop, shakes, you name it. And I was getting stronger and fitter, but I also was just getting fatter and more miserable. And I couldn't get my head around the fact that I wasn't a bodybuilder. I was constantly stressing my body out by doing what's called like AMRAPs, as many reps as possible, workouts, which is very high load. And I didn't understand the science behind it well enough. And I didn't understand my body well enough that I wasn't an elite CrossFit athlete. And if I wanted to get to that state, I had to build myself up to it. And what was happening was just my body was adapting to that. And with the excess amount of stress, I was just experiencing body weight gain. So to say that there's a starvation mode, I would say the starvation mode is probably the best mode there is, if you want to call it that. If you're in the middle of a fast, you're going to actually preserve muscle because of the increase in growth hormone. I've been fasting regularly for 3 years. And to put it in context too, I did all my lead up training. I did the actual Ironman itself with no carbohydrates. And I don't eat like that so much now. I have a bit more carbohydrates, but ultimately I still incorporated fasting in a lot of my off days. And it allowed me to control my body weight, because on the days I was training, I was eating 4,000 to 5,000 calories, mostly protein and fat. So to incorporate a little bit of that, what we call, the Greeks called eustress, so good stress, was really important for my body to be able to adapt long term. And so the more you're able to get out of your comfort zone and to have a little bit of that eustress, and fasting is that eustress, your body will adapt to that eustress to come back to homeostasis, so that you won't experience the same amount of stress the next time you do it. So the adaptations allow you to be more efficient. So they say, okay, this guy clearly is not always eating all the time. Okay, well, what do we need to do? Okay, we need to be able to access this fuel source. What's that fuel source? Body fat. And so long as your goal is not huge gains in the gym, massive arms, massive chest, bodybuilding style, then being in a little bit of a starvation mode is definitely beneficial for the overwhelming majority of humanity.
How often should you fast? Even the intermittent fasting, or do a day fast, 2-day fast? What is from your experience on that? And I know everybody's body is completely different, but is there a bit of a rule of thumb on that?
Yeah. Now we're treading in uncharted waters here. Everybody's got an opinion, right? And the reason why it's so tricky to say is that literally everybody's genetic makeup is completely different. With that being said, you're on the path if you are understanding that your body needs to be well understood by you. And if you notice, like, hey, I've been doing, intermittent fasting for, let's say, a few weeks, nothing's changing. Like, you don't notice any feeling of benefit, then maybe you're doing something wrong. Maybe you're doing too little, maybe you're doing too long. Start adopting the philosophy of you're an N of 1 experiment. So you are the test subject. So try new things. Maybe go a little bit longer, maybe shorten it up. I guess rule of thumb, typically I just don't eat breakfast, but the great, I should say that, I guess, to go back to the rule of thumb, I got from Mark Sisson. So Mark Sisson is the Primal Blueprint guy, triathlete, Ironman, you name it. Like, he's very popular and his book is great. And he uses the term metabolically flexible. And I love it because it allows you to not be dogmatic. I hate being dogmatic about things. It's like, oh, you must fast 3 times a week. You must do a 16-8. You must, no. It's, okay, how do you feel today? And for instance, today I woke up, I wasn't hungry. And up until a few years ago, I would still eat even though I wasn't hungry. And until you get that awareness, and which fasting allows you to do, you're going to make some mistakes. And if I wake up and I'm hungry, I eat. And if I'm not hungry, I don't. And I know it sounds simple, but that's how I live right now. And if, like, for instance, today, I think I feel kind of hungry. It's hard because I'm actively doing something. I haven't eaten breakfast. I've only had black coffee and I've only had water. Will I have lunch? It doesn't look like it because I'm busy now until supper. So I basically had a 24-hour fast today by accident. I wasn't planning it, but I know psychologically I'll be okay. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to lose gains. I didn't go to the gym today, but I still exercise. I'll be okay. Tomorrow, I know I have to eat. I'll be at the gym. So therefore, I'll likely eat breakfast. So to say, like, how many days a week, I would just say, just start. Try not to eat breakfast, see how that feels. Drink some water, have a bit of salt, and just enjoy the ride. Watch all kinds of videos. Read. That would be my recommendation. And then figure out what your protocol is. So typically I'll do maybe 24-hour fast a week, no more than that. Fridays, my buddy, what does he call it? He calls it feast day instead of cheat day. I do the same thing too. I have a beer, I eat whatever I want at supper time. I don't, if it's pizza, cool, I eat pizza. It's not going to put me behind the 8 ball. And I don't think about fasting at that point. And it just becomes part of what you do, because psychologically you're in control of how you feel, because you understand that you're not going to A, lose muscle mass, and B, you're not going to starve to death. Once you understand that, you've unlocked everything, because you can just say, well, I don't have time for lunch today. I'll be okay. If anything, I'll be better. And it's the most important thing that I've been able to incorporate into my daily routine, is just, if I don't have time, I'll be okay. I don't need to rush out and get a granola bar or like an apple. And I see that all the time, right? Oh, I need to eat. I grab apple, banana, crackers, and just stuff your face. And if anything, you're doing more damage than good by doing.
Dave, we're already at an hour here. I definitely need to get you in as a guest again, because I can even touch on the Nibble Warrior book and the journey that led you to that, and from back injury to actually being able to do these Ironmans and CrossFit, and just incredible working out.
So I got my shirt on today.
Iron, there we
Iron,
go.
there you go.
I love it. How can fathers get a hold of you, find out a little bit more about you? I will put a link to your book that fathers can, if they want to find out more and read your book. How can they follow you on social media or get hold of you?
Yeah, super easy. So my website is davemorrow.net. You can go there, sign up to the mailing list. That'd be awesome. Also on social media, I'm Dave Morrow PT. So that's on Facebook and Instagram. I'm also on Twitter too, but not the best medium to get an idea of what I'm doing. I mostly just creep other people. And then on YouTube, that's Dave Morrow. In brackets, it's hard to kill. There's another Dave Morrow out there who's a much more handsome photographer, but I'm the physical fitness guy. So you can follow me there on YouTube and get all kinds of updates on the podcast and other videos I do on training and nutrition.
I love it, Dave. Well, I include all of those links in this recording for the fathers that are watching this. And appreciate you, my brother. Definitely will get you in again in the future to follow up on this. I think we've just scratched the surface, but some real valuable insights here on nutrition and working out and the type of foods. So appreciate you, my brother, for joining today.
Thanks so much, Gary. Really appreciate it. Yeah, and if any one of you want to have a chat, feel free to message me on my website. I'll be sure to give you some value for your time.
I love it. Take care, my brother.
Thanks, Gary.